This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. Boring. Boring.
Okay, you gotta work. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. That's exactly what you're doing. You're in no position to dictate what we're gonna feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome to Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV, where we find the facts, kill the spin and tell it like it is. Been a busy week if you're watching this live. A story which has almost gone unnoticed is what I want to cover now. And if you're watching in the archive, it will still have relevance. The Conservative Party in the United Kingdom has decided to scrap its net zero policy. What does that mean? It means that by 2050, if the Conservatives win, and that's a tall order, they're not going to try to get us to a net zero carbon dioxide situation. That's what we're going to talk about today. Before we go into that any further, you're going to find a whole bunch of shows that you might find interesting here on subjects which the mainstream media don't really want to cover. Why? Because they seem to have a bias all their own. I suppose every human being has a bias, but we try to give a broad gamut of stories and information here. Everything from Chris Williamson, former Labour MP, now in the Workers' Party, that's Galloway's lot, right through to Tommy Robinson and everybody in between as well. What you'll find, therefore, is maybe that this is a mind-expanding station, and hopefully that's what's going to happen in this particular show as well. Do please subscribe. Go to Unprecedented TV on YouTube. Doesn't cost anything for now, and the more of you subscribe, the more we can actually do for all kinds of very important reasons. You can also follow me on X at Lembit Öpik. However you choose to watch us, you're very welcome today. Our guest today is also welcome. He's actually one of our presenters, but today he's wearing the hat of a commentator. I actually met him through the world of driving and automotive matters. In addition to that, he's something of a whiz when it comes to climatology and the science, the real science behind climate change. I don't think he's that convinced that there ever was a problem with carbon dioxide, but we'll find out in a minute. Please welcome the great man himself. That's Brian Gregory from the Alliance of British Drivders. Brian, good to see you. You look like you're in a you look like in a very moody place. Is your picture being directed by Martin Scorsese?
Possibly, yes. But I have had problems with this camera and I ended up looking like a home pride flower grader. So this is a definite improvement on what was happening on some of the Full Throttle episodes, because I looked like I'd been dropped into a flower silo and then fished out.
You still look a bit pasty. Just tell us first of all about but in a good way. Tell us about your job first, then you can have a quick plug for your show.
Well, it depends whether you're talking about the Alliance of British Drivers or Full Throttle.
Do them both.
Well, the Alliance of British Drivers was formed something over 30 years ago now, really focusing at that time mainly on motoring issues and how legislation, whether it be environmental, legal, or whatever, affected drivers. But the whole drift of policy now affecting all of us seems to descend from this whole net zero madness, and the compression of freedom of movement, freedom of expression, freedom of association is all associated with this desire to corral and control us in 15-minute cities, and that's a direct descendant of the insane net zero policy.
And those policies were actually originally introduced by the Conservatives themselves under Theresa May, weren't they?
Net zero was, but the Climate Change Act was brought in by climate crisis zealot Ed Miliband, who is totally immune to any logic or reason. He brought in the Climate Change Act, and then Theresa May compounded the felony by bringing in this net zero legislation. Now, let me make absolutely clear, there are enormous elephants in the room regarding this. Firstly, because man-made carbon dioxide emissions are only about 3.5% of the total. Yeah, I have the power, but not the brains.
Yeah, I thought you'd like that one. Anyway, sorry, I couldn't resist it. Sorry about that.
So,
Anyway,
okay,
carry on.
That's the first thing. Okay, is that man-made carbon dioxide is only a tiny proportion of the total. We don't have any control over 95% of the emissions, which are natural ones. So even if we stopped emitting tomorrow, the climate wouldn't change because substantively emissions won't change. Right? That's the first thing. Second thing is, if you go back in history, you can see most of the time, there's no correlation between where the carbon dioxide levels are and where the temperatures are. For short periods, they are, but a lot of the time, the temperature's going one way and the carbon dioxide's going the other. And in fact, there's always a lag, and it's always the carbon dioxide that follows the temperature change, not the other way around. So the IPCC has the cart driving the horse.
Tell us what that is, the IPCC.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Control, the architects, along with the UN and various other agencies of this net zero madness.
I think it's actually climate change, Interparliamentary Panel on Climate Change.
Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Yeah.
It's not very catchy, is it?
Not really. It's not going to get in the charts.
Let's talk about what Kemi Badenoch has said now. She vows to repeal the Climate Change Act. Remind us what the Act does.
Well, the Act mandates that we must reduce our effective man-made emissions to zero by 2050, so that we're carbon neutral, as it's called. But it's ridiculous to legislate about a gas that's essential for life on the planet, because if there's no carbon dioxide, there's no photosynthesis. If there's no photosynthesis, there's no plants. If there's no plants, there's no animals and no humans. So
carbon dioxide is actually our friend.
Absolutely, and the more carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere, the better plants grow, the more efficiently they use water, which means that you can cultivate in places that currently it's not possible, because what carbon dioxide does as it rises in concentration in the atmosphere, it means that the plant stomata, these little pores that let carbon dioxide and water in and out, they can contract. And that means that plants use water more efficiently when there's higher carbon dioxide levels. And commercial greenhouses typically have carbon dioxide levels of 1,000 to 1,200 ppm. And
what does that mean?
That's about 400. It's about 3 times what we have now.
In the ordinary atmosphere.
Yeah, and they do that because it massively improves plant yields.
So when Kemi Badenoch vows to repeal the Climate Change Act, what in practical terms will that mean? She says it'll mean cheap energy.
It will mean cheap energy if we do other things as well, because currently our energy policy has been driven by the madman I've already mentioned, and he is putting in more and more renewables, solar and wind. And the problem is that when the wind doesn't blow, you don't get any input from them, and to actually get the capacity that he needs, because the capacity utilization of wind is only about 30%. So in other words, if you want 1,000 gigawatts, you need to build 3,000 gigawatts of effective capacity, because it's only 30% efficient. Okay. Yeah. So we've got a massive overcapacity of wind. And when the wind is blowing, there's too much capacity and we have to turn it off, because if we feed it into the grid, because it's direct current, it has to be inverted and turned into AC to work on our grid. The grid will fall over as it did in Spain. There was a 2 to 3 day blackout a month or two ago, essentially due to the fact that they tried to push too much renewable power into the grid, and they didn't have the conventional capacity, combined cycle gas turbine stuff, which provides inertia because it uses big spinning magnets. And the result of that was that the whole grid fell over in Spain.
Has that been proved? I was sure that was the case, but yes. I don't know that you're saying that it has actually been now affirmed.
There's a super website called whatlogic.com, run by Catherine Porter, who's an energy expert, and she's done a forensic dissemination of what caused that blackout. I would advise anybody who wants to understand what's going on with energy policy to look at Catherine Porter's website. She is absolutely brilliant.
Okay, so that's the first thing then, that we've actually seen blackouts precisely because of what many people predicted.
Yeah.
Then moving on from this, why did the Conservatives introduce this in the first place?
Because none of them are numerate or literate. Most of them have read PPE rather than chemistry or physics, and they don't understand science, and they're being advised by civil servants who don't understand science either.
All right, well, back to the case in point here. She says that the climate pledge is catastrophic mistake. She's basically damning herself and her own party, isn't she?
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the fact that the woman brought this in the first place without checking whether the science was sound is an indictment anyway. I wouldn't take any notice of anything she says, frankly.
It was Theresa May who introduced it, and as you say, she's not a climatologist.
No.
Unfortunately, a lot of climatologists are telling us that there is a climate emergency. Why do they say that?
Because they're being paid, because it's keeping them in a job, and it's keeping them in grants at universities and places like that. If you talk to real proper climatologists, most of whom have retired, people like Dick Lindzen, who's a Nobel laureate, I think, he's an emeritus professor anyway. Dick Lindzen just rubbishes this climate change agenda and says it's absolute nonsense. And so do people like Steve Koonin, Michael Schellenberger. There's a load of people, Bjorn Lomborg as well. You know, people who have environmental credentials who also say net zero is stupid and it's economic suicide. And we can see that in what's happening in our industries at the moment. The industry that I was in, the titanium pigment industry, uses massive amounts of energy. And energy in this country is 6 times more expensive than China or India or places like that. And even America, I think, is similar. And as a result, we're pricing our industries out of existence and out of this country. Oil refineries are closing. Major industries are moving out of the UK to other places where the regulatory regime is sane.
Yeah, it does say here also former Prime Minister who strengthened net zero targets, deeply disappointed in Tory pledge to scrap Climate Change Act. Now, I don't know if that means Theresa May or Boris Johnson, but they were both climate nuts, and neither of them seemed to have any real understanding of climate.
Well, Boris had his wife Carrie whispering in his ear, who was very much on this page, and indeed so is Johnson's father, Stanley Johnson, who wants all air travel to be regulated and controlled. People wouldn't be able to move where and when they want. He's a closet eugenicist and wants the population to be reduced by 95%, which is what the Club of Rome wants also, by the way, which feeds into all sorts of places like the World Economic Forum, World Bank, UN. They're a pretty odd bunch when you start investigating what philosophies they believe in. But
they don't really apply to themselves. Boris Johnson, his father, was very happy to fly during the COVID lockdown.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the all men are equal. It's just that some are more equal than others.
Okay, so on this one, before we move on, how would you summarize the change from where we were to where the Tories claim they're going to be?
Well, it's good news, but I would add the caveat that they've got an uphill struggle, as would any administration, be it them or Reform Tory coalition or whatever, because the civil service is embedded with this woke philosophy. And frankly, you'd have to strip out the civil service, all of these parliamentary undersecretaries, all of these minions. They all need stripping out and replacing with people who actually understand how the economy works. Because the current philosophy is driving this country into the ground, and our growth rate is parlous, basically because Rachel Reeves, whoever's the Environment Secretary now, because I've lost count of which politician it is, and Starmer, none of them understand science and none of them understand economics. And they need to speak to people like David Turver and Catherine Porter to understand what we need to do to actually get this economy going. And the first thing you do is you strip out the renewables, you take all the subsidies away from any renewables or gas generation or whatever, put them all on a level playing field and see which one is the most energy efficient and go with that.
So let's go back to Ed Miliband then. We've had a laugh at his expense. He said Tories are anti-science for abandoning net zero consensus. Energy and Net Zero Secretary lays out stark picture of how climate crisis and nature depletion is affecting UK.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Where's the climate crisis?
Well, in his head for sure.
Show me the statistics that say we have a climate crisis, and even the IPCC does not say that. I mean, what they actually say is, without their measures, they reckon that growth would be sort of a couple of points less. You know, I mean a couple of decimal points. You know, percent, 10 or no, 0.1 or 0.2% different, whether you do net zero or not. But the problem is the economic carnage is colossal. I mean, the estimates of the cost of net zero vary from Net Zero Watch, which reckons it's about 3 trillion. Okay, so hold that figure, 3 trillion. McKinsey reckons it could be 15 trillion. So that's 500 billion, half a trillion a year over 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And our GDP is only 3 trillion at the moment. So half a trillion is like a sixth of our economy. Imagine, you know, a 6-year wage packet being sucked out and not available to spend. It's madness.
So it's a tricky old situation. Now, the reality is that I will express an opinion here. I think Ed Miliband hasn't got a clue. I think he is scientifically illiterate. Regular viewers know I don't think there's a climate emergency. I just don't see anything in it at all.
Well, there's a website, and it's run by Royce Spencer, and it measures satellite average temperature measures. It takes a measure of all the satellites and aggregates them, and you know these are self-regulating and self-correcting satellites. So there's no input from climatologists. It's just raw data that these satellites have collected, and month on month, it shows that yes, we've had a warming of over the last 40 odd years of 0.8, 0.9 degrees, maybe Celsius, but we're coming out of the last ice age. If the temperature isn't going up, then it's going to go down, and that's really, really bad news.
When did the last? Sorry, go on.
Well, the last ice age ended. Well, it hasn't. We're in it still. We're at the top end of that scale, and we've seen a little uptick at the end. But the problem is that the uptick's no bigger than in the Roman warming, the Minoan warming. Taken the other way, the Minoan warming, which was about 3,000 years or so ago, I think. The Roman warming, 2,000, and the medieval warming, which was just before the Dark Ages. And the trajectory of those peaks is downward. It's not upwards, and that suggests that the climate is actually peaked, and we're going into the down phase. And this idea of a runaway warming, if the temperature gets above a certain level, you've got to be completely out of your tree to imagine that, because this planet is suspended in an interplanetary medium which is at 3 degrees Kelvin. Now, 0 Kelvin is when all molecular motion stops, right? So 3 degrees Kelvin is pretty damn cold, minus 270 Celsius. And all that happens if we get a bit of warming and the planet warms a bit, it all gets whipped out to space, because the 3 degrees Kelvin is a massive temperature difference, and it's sucking heat out of this planet all the time at an enormous rate as the sun feeds it in. And all that happens is that the equilibrium point varies depending on the energy input against the energy output that goes back out to space. So there's no tipping point. That's just nonsense.
Now, before we go any further, I have to play a little trailer for a show for our friend Basil Valentine in a minute. But after the break, I want to talk with you about something called Clintel.
Yes.
And get to the heart of this. A whole bunch of scientists who don't seem to think there's a climate emergency. And I want you to explain in simple terms that anyone would understand why you think that the 97% claim. 97%. Don't mock me. I'm asking you the question. I'm not saying I believe it myself. The 97% of scientists believe that there's a climate emergency. Hold that thought, though.
That was a masterpiece of statistical legerdemain.
Wait. Hold on to it. I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that in a minute. Before we go any further, I knew that would provoke him. I want to remind you that Basil Valentine is on every day around lunchtime. And it's a great show. This is to make you like it. And that's Basil Valentine. He's on every day around lunchtime. You can find him at the archive as well. And before we go any further, you will know that Basil Valentine has been with us right from the very start. And he has some absolutely fantastic guests. He's got a great address book. So pop into Basil Valentine. You'll find him Monday to Friday around 1 o'clock. But meanwhile, we have the extraordinarily disrespectful Brian Gregory when it comes to anything he disagrees with. Why were you laughing about the 97% claim? The 97% of scientists, and then it went up to 99%, I think, of scientists say that there's a climate emergency.
Well, actually, this arose from some, Cook, I think the guy's name, who did this, and he did a study of about 12,000 climate papers and classified them into categories. The problem for him was that over 2/3 of them had expressed no opinion, okay? 2/3 of the 12,000, so 8,000 roughly, give or take. And the remaining ones, there was about 1,000, I think it was, 978 or something like that, that you know, said we're all doomed, Mr. Mannering, Captain Mannering, we're all doomed. And there was sort of, I can't remember the number now. It's a small number who said actually, no, man's not having any effect on the climate. And then there's a significant chance that said that man is having an effect on the climate, but it's not enough to cause problems. Okay. And when you aggregated them, that was about 25%. Only 8% were saying that you know, we're all doomed. But what Cook did was look at the extreme views. He looked at the ones that said man's not having any effect on the climate and the ones that said we're doomed. And when you took that ratio, 97% of those people said, you know, there's a problem. But
that's quite a complicated explanation. The way I'd put, I know the piece of research you're referring to. The way I'd put it is, they looked at people who said human beings make no difference at all, which can't be true. We have to have some difference. Even I think that.
One, but yes.
And they looked at the people who said, no, as you say, we're all doomed. And basically, if you look at the people who said absolutely no difference versus the people who said terrible difference, then it was 97% said terrible difference. But we must be making some difference.
And he stripped out 25% of scientists who actually said man is having an effect, but it's not a major one. Right? And that was 3 times the percentage who said we're all doomed.
So Clintel, this is an organization, Climate Intelligence, said there is no climate emergency. World Climate Declaration they've got. Now, tell us about this, because they say there are a lot of people signing this.
Yeah, I signed it. And so has Steve Koonin, Richard Lindzen, loads and loads of eminent climate scientists who basically say, you know, to paraphrase American parlance, who basically think that the runaway man-made carbon dioxide-driven climate change thesis is a receptacle of excrement, I think, is the paraphrase.
Okay, you got to be very careful. Thank you.
You know the American phrase. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, I know. I'm just laughing at the way you said it.
Obviously,
I think that sound is your swear warner.
yeah. But I mean, essentially, there is a very large number of eminent scientists who signed that declaration, and basically they're being ignored by. They've taken this information to the UN, of course, and the UN just doesn't want to know. Well, and the IPCC, of course.
What's the United Nations' motivation for talking rubbish?
The only thing I can assume is a power grab, because if you tell everybody we're all doomed, we need to do this to save ourselves, that gives them a huge amount of power over everybody. You know, if you think your existence is in danger, you'll do virtually anything to stop that danger from emerging. But the problem is, it's a phantom menace.
Oh, very Star Warsian of you.
Yeah.
But we've seen some artist impressions. I want to share some of these. If we can get the Big Ben one up, please. Yeah, there we are. There's an artist impression of London.
Yeah, but the media keep reporting all this rubbish, and there's a paper just come out very recently in the last few weeks saying that the if you look at how sea levels have changed over millennia, well, almost all the change was before human industrialization, and it's flattened out now, and the change is like a matter of millimeters a year. And
there's a problem. There's a problem with this picture as well, because if Big Ben was leaning that far over, it would have fallen over by then.
It mixed up with Big Ben and the Tower of Pisa, yeah.
What about this then? Global sea levels could rise by 50 feet if we don't stop climate change, says Metro News.
Well, it's rubbish.
Well, apparently it's going to climb so suddenly.
Because it's not borne out by statistics. Even the UN's own data doesn't bear that out. IPCC's own data, I mean.
It looks like it's climbing so quickly that it's a wave.
Yeah.
Instant climbing.
It's a tsunami.
It's another example. Here we are.
Yeah.
And it's actually raining in that one as well.
They've got the Union flag and the English flag flying there. That's more patriotic than most councils.
What that means, let me interpret that for you. What that means is Reform UK has become the government, and they've done such a catastrophic job of saving us from the climate emergency that all that will be left poking out from London will be the top of the shard. What I used to call Post Office Tower, now called Telecom Tower, and a couple of British and English flags.
No,
you see, you're complacent. You're complacent.
No, I've actually looked at the signs. I'm not complacent. That's the problem. The science does not support any of this absolute rubbish. It doesn't matter whether you look at forest fires, extreme weather, typhoons, hurricanes, sea level changes, ice changes. All of the stuff we're being fed by the mainstream media is absolute rubbish. It hasn't been fact checked in the real scientific sense.
They've been looking at this really deep ice core from the Antarctic, 1.5 million years worth of records. If you're right, that should show that there isn't a correlation between carbon dioxide and temperature, at least that there isn't a causal correlation where carbon dioxide changes and then temperature changes. Can they measure it accurately enough?
Well, there's an excellent video by a guy called Stefan Pedersen on this. And he's I can't remember the URL at the minute, but if you Google Stefan Steffen, I think it is Pedersen, Pedersen, he's a Danish climatologist and works on this very topic on ice cores, and he's done a brilliant short video, and it's paraphrased: "We live in cold times," because when they look at the temperature record going back 10,000 years or so, basically it shows that it was a lot warmer in the past. We've gone through this dip. We're coming out of the dip, but we're still temperatures over millennia. 80% of the record, the temperatures were higher than they are today. And basically, he says the worst place we could have started doing instrumental temperature measurements was when we started, which is in the late 1700s, because we were in an ice age. Little ice age in this case, not a full-on ice age, and since then the temperatures have been going up, but we can't really tell whether it's what the major influences are, and especially if we start from the premise that carbon dioxide is the driver and exclude all other influences, because then you're working with blinkers on, which is what the IPCC is doing, because they don't look at changes in solar radiation. They don't look at changes in cosmic rays, cloud cover, ocean currents. They don't factor any of that in, and all of those have major effects, because basically we're sitting in a medium where the sun is sending solar radiation to the Earth. It's being absorbed mainly by the Earth's oceans. The Earth's oceans have convection currents, which move that heat and energy around. And then as that moves, it changes the climate around the planet in different ways in different areas. And then it's all being, as I said before, because the temperature in the interplanetary space is 3 degrees Kelvin, all that energy is being sucked out again. So it's an in-out energy balance. And it just varies by small amounts, which, and then frankly, on the scale that we're looking at, even 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 10 degrees Kelvin is a small amount. And we've had temperatures in the past, in the Holocene maximum, as it's called, which were 5 to 10 degrees higher than they are now for short intervals, and then drop down to an average.
You're using quite fancy words. What you're saying is the climate goes up and climate goes down, and there's not much to do with humans.
Yeah, exactly.
A couple of stories we found, which were quite interesting. You don't seem to see these in the mainstream. Just to explain, I was trying to find out if snow is a thing of the past. There was a guy called Viner, Dr. Viner, who was in the now totally discredited, in my view, University of East Anglia climate department, something like that. But we found out that they were basically conducting nefarious activities to try and make it look like there was a climate emergency.
The ClimateGate emails.
ClimateGate emails, that's right. I won't go into them now, but if you're interested, put ClimateGate, University of East Anglia, and you'll probably not want to send your kids to the UEA. At least not that department after that.
The problem is that people embedded in this organisation and the Met Office are actually fiddling temperature data that's fed into HADCRUT, I think it's called, which is the climate model. At the Hadley Institute, I think it is HADCRUT model. Anyway, when you look at the standard of data provided by most of the weather stations in the UK, it's class 5, which means like there's a variability in temperature measures. It could be plus or minus 2 degrees. So and of course a number of them are placed like on the runway or near the runway at Gatwick, and other ones near RAF Coningsby, you know. So they wait until the typhoons are taken off and then they measure the temperature.
That's an actual example, isn't it? That's what apparently happened when they got this record temperature at RAF Coningsby. It was when 3 Typhoon aircraft were taking off. And again, the climatologist I mentioned before, Roy Spencer, has written a book about this, and he has estimated that at least half of the temperature rise that we've been seeing in recent years from instrumental measurements is due to something called the urban heat island effect. Because all of these temperature stations, when they were first established, were in rural areas, but the problem is creeping urbanization, which brings concrete, tarmac, which is, you know, once that absorbs heat, it then radiates it to the surrounding environment. And so there's a huge bias in a lot of the temperature measurements that is not corrected for by IPCC or by any of their models. So, you know, the more urbanization there is, the higher the urban temperatures are, and particularly urban evening temperatures, when all this energy is being radiated from buildings back into the ambient environment. And so the data are just crap. Oh, and the other problem is there's over 100 stations in the UK which actually don't exist, and the Met Office is putting in proxy data based on their own you can go on. It's on I think it's What's Up With That, or one of these other websites, but basically the data is being put in for phantom stations, which the Met Office estimates the temperature from stations that are supposed to be somewhere near them. But when you ask them what stations they are, they won't tell you. This is ridiculous. So much to talk about. And I know that you've got a very big guest on Full Throttle for a two-part series. Monkton, Christopher Monkton, very clever on this.
He is absolutely. He's a font of knowledge and wisdom. Basically, we said we're going to have an hour episode, and we ended up having a 2 hour. So we'll be cutting that down into 2 episodes. But Christopher Monkton is absolutely brilliant, and then he's just a super. He links everything together. He's a super storyteller, as well as giving you the science. He gives you the background. We have to get him back, because the thing that we really want him to cover in the future is the politicization of this whole thing, because he's been around initially from when Margaret Thatcher was involved, and the climate change, spectre of climate change was really a method of controlling, getting the miners' unions under control. The miners' unions, of course, led by Scargill, who'd been indoctrinated by the KGB, apparently.
Well, okay, that's a whole new subject. I'm not even going to let you go down that path. Literally not going down. Is Arthur Scargill working for the Communist Party of the former Soviet? I don't know. Well, let's just try and focus on what we're talking about.
There's even rumours that every single prime minister in recent times has been a member of the Fabian Society.
All right, too much. We're not doing that today. We're not doing that today. Let's just try and focus. I don't know what's in that coffee. The
problem that we talked
you talked about
Monkton, and I've obviously, got his mentality embedded now.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, some would say conspiracy theorist, but let's move on.
Yeah, but last month's conspiracy theorist is this month's political pundit, you know?
Yeah, you mentioned double standards, and I'll come to this explicitly. What we see is the Labour Party flying all around the world telling us not to fly. And the endless target has been aviation. And now it's a really strange thing because they're all very keen on expanding Heathrow and Gatwick, which I happen to support, by the way. And suddenly these evil carbon dioxide emitters, they're not so bad. It's almost like it's slightly gone out of fashion to say you can't fly. David Miliband went to America while his brother was moaning. And here's the thing. I don't know if you know this, Ed Miliband, Red Ed, the fanatic that we saw before, he flew all the way to New York for some reason to do with the Gaza.
Why could he not get on a sailboat and go to New York?
Why couldn't he swim? Why did he have to go on one of these? I bet he didn't travel economy either.
Goose grease out and get,
Exactly. So he's sitting there producing his carbon dioxide, telling us not to fly. But perhaps one of the biggest ironies of all, in my view, is that when you watch these people, especially the world leaders, there are people like Barack Obama endlessly going on about this. And then, of course, when he traveled, just for one man, this was the aircraft. That was it. All of that just for Barack Obama and indeed every American president.
Well, and his security detail and his advisors and all the rest of it, the company and wherever he goes.
Hundreds of tons of carbon dioxide for one man.
It's hypocrisy of the highest order. And of course, all the others, like the guy who runs, Zuckerman, is it? Mark Zuckerman?
Yeah.
He's forever telling everybody, you need to reduce your carbon footprint. He's got umpteen bloody diesel yachts and private planes and flies about all over the place. It's do as I say, not as I do, because, you are just minions. And we are the important people, and we're allowed to do stuff like this. It is gross hypocrisy.
Yeah. And this literally produces hundreds of tons of carbon dioxide for an international flight. And it's Barack Obama getting off the plane.
It's plant food. It's wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, telling other people you must curb your or reduce your carbon footprint while they go merrily charging all over the place on whatever mode of transport they want. It's just rank hypocrisy, and we should ignore it.
Now, Dr. David Viner, that's what he was called, this guy from the University of East Anglia, who utterly disgraced himself by saying children just won't know what snow is. Well, I'm not so sure about that. We were told that snow had vanished. There's some evidence from non-political places that have a vested interest in having snow, such as in this thing here. It said, last winter was one for the record books. Japan was pummeled by relentless snowfall, setting records across the islands. And that was about 2024. And then John LeConte shows that JPOW still exists. I don't quite know what that stands for, but I found this, and this is about last year. The reason I put this up is because we were being told that Mount Fuji was having later and later snow. They said that Mount Fuji was one of the poster boys. That's a big mountain in Japan. Poster boys for climate change. But then we have this story, which is record snows. And that's not the only one. Closer to home, we've seen the Mirror put the shock snow forecast of 4 centimeters per hour flurries as maps reveal exact date. Now, this is just from the 29th of September. If you're watching this in the archives, you'll know if it's true or not. But once again, in advanced weather modelling, maps show snow could be falling at a rate of around 4 centimeters per hour in parts of the UK.
So,
while the white stuff expected to settle, across the large swathe of the country. This is completely contradictory to what that foolish, frankly, idiot, Dr. Viner said, children won't know what snow is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the climate changes. We have no real control over it, as I've said. And worse, computer forecasts of climate change are absolute junk. When you look at the IPCC forecasts of temperature change models against the observed data, there's a huge gap. The observed data is going up at a something like that. And all the models do, or the models do that, basically, that massive difference, because they are totally misrepresenting the feedbacks in the climate, or ignoring some of them. And the result is the models all run hot. They're like hot rod climate models. And as an ex-IPCC editor, actually, John Christie at the University of Alabama, and he's put a graphic of all these climate models and the observed temperatures, and there's only one model at the bottom that follows the observed temperatures. And that model is a Russian model produced by Habibullah Abdusamatov. I promise you that's the guy, who's a Russian astrophysicist. And his model doesn't have any carbon dioxide input into the feedback, just water vapor, which is the dominant global warming gas.
That's interesting. In terms of water vapor, of course, that's what snow is cold water vapor that condenses out. This is interesting, because if you're watching this live, then we make the prediction that the day that the Mirror is right, Mirror newspaper in the United Kingdom is right, and there will be snow flurries fairly soon. And if you're watching it in the archive, you'll know if we were right or not.
Yeah. I mean, all this rubbish about, the not being able to, there being no snow around the Arctic, the passage around the Arctic. Well, there's already this season, there's been one Russian vessel stuck. Because
really?
Yeah. It was reported earlier this year that it couldn't get through. The ice was too thick. Even the icebreaker, nuclear-powered icebreaker, couldn't get through, because the levels of icebergs and snow and whatnot were too intense. And the latest figures are tracking the average of the last sort of 20 years pretty closely, and actually even rising above that level. So there's no likelihood whatsoever of the Arctic being ice free. Not in this climate cycle. There have been 4 climate cycles in the past where there's been no Arctic ice and no Antarctic ice either. But not in recent history. I mean, you're talking millions of years ago.
Well, finish with the Green Party. They got a new leader. We'll come to him in a minute. But first of all, these people, I don't know if they're in the Green Party or not, but these activists hope Taylor Swift would see paint protest. These activists, or one of them at least, I don't really look at the detail. Jennifer Kowalski, 29, and Cole McDonald, 23, are on trial at Chelmsford Crown Court. They're accused of spraying Taylor Swift's aircraft because they thought it might shake her into awareness of climate change. Now, I don't think either of them would know as much as you about science, but these sorts of people just undermine their entire case, don't they?
Well,
I mean, who are you going to support? Are you going to support them, or are you going to be on Taylor Swift's side? I mean, it's like I don't know that she's got involved. She focuses on what she does well, which is
exactly,
and these other ones they focus on what they don't do well, which is science.
Yeah, exactly, and this is why people like Bono and all these other Sting and people like that who pontificate on climate change should go and look at and learn the flipping science, and then come back and pontificate. Don't just parrot what the mainstream media say, because the mainstream media coverage of climate matters is extremely flawed.
Yeah, I think that as well, which leads me to a direct question about the Green Party, really. The Green Party has been in hot water once again. If you're watching this live, you'll see it in the news at the moment. But they got into hot water because they strayed away from green politics, a bit like little Greta Thunberg, who's been trying to sort out Gaza. Apparently, her lack of expertise in climatology entitles her to express her lack of expertise in Middle East politics as well. Yeah. But the Green Party is in pretty hot water because the deputy leader, here it is, the deputy leader is in pretty big trouble, I think. A new Green Party leader under pressure to sack deputy leader for defending October the 7th terrorists. As it says, Mohsen Ali suggested condemnation of Hamas attack on Israel was white supremacy. Now, as I understand it, this man is actually the deputy leader of the Green Party, and he said these things. Now, given recent events, that's a pretty bad look. I put it to you that the Green Party are a single issue organization. They don't get their single issue right. And when they stray into real politics, they mess it up.
Yeah, well, again, the Green Party is very much steeped in this sort of command and control ideology. You know, that the statist. You know, that we, the citizens of this country, should be sort of the rightless pawns of the state. You know, that the state should control everything, like where you're allowed to go, who you're allowed to associate with, what you're allowed to say. When you're allowed to say it, where you're allowed to say it, and you know, you should just bow down to the government, you know.
Yeah, but
that's not a democracy, and it's not what any right-thinking person wants.
But why do they think they should be talking about things like? Why should they be talking about things like Gaza at all? They've got no qualification.
No. Well, it doesn't seem like they've got much qualification to talk about environmental matters either, but that seems to be totally irrelevant.
Yeah, I always forget the Green Zach something is his name.
Oh no,
Zach Polanski. It's Zach Polanski, isn't it? Yeah. Well, basically, he seems to be this effusive actor, thespian type person.
Yeah,
who I don't find at all credible, but. Yeah. He basically, I heard him very recently in an interview, and he was being asked about he probably wants to talk about the climate crisis, but he was being asked about the Gaza-Israel situation, and they kept asking him, well, what do you say about people like the man who we were just looking at there? Yeah, there he is again, the Mothin Ali, and what he said, oh, it's okay, he's apologized now. Apparently, that's all he had to do, just had to apologize.
And that makes it okay.
Yeah, and it's just wherever you stand on the question of Israel and Palestine, I don't understand why the Green Party can pretend that they've got any serious, credible position on it, because they keep making comments which, regardless of where you stand in this hugely charged debate, they just don't find them credible. I have to tell you, in 1989. I considered joining the Green Party instead of the Liberal Democrats. And the reason I didn't, in 1989, I was 24 years old, is because I realized they were a single issue party and there was no way that you could shoehorn green politics into everything else. And I thought, nah, it's just not right. It's a policy area. It's not the policy area. But they do get themselves into a terrible mess with these things.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing is, even when the IPCC start looking at these sort of things, you find that climate is like bottom of the list of what electors believe is important. You know, they're more concerned about living standards, about safety, freedom of choice, stuff like that, those issues, and totally unconcerned about the alleged climate crisis that doesn't actually exist.
So let me ask you then, the burning issue of the day, if you're watching this live, prove that you're au fait, that you're more connected than Zach Polanski, the Green Party leader. What do you think of Taylor Swift's new album then? You know, what do you think? Do you think that you know more about it than he does?
I've no idea. I've never listened to a Taylor Swift album.
Well, then you're not in any more touch than Mothin Ali.
Not sure I've even listened to a Taylor Swift track, never mind an album.
You must have heard something from Taylor Swift.
Maybe I have, but I don't have the radio on in the car. I don't listen to the radio because it's got loads of adverts. I listen to tracks on my iPod, and I'm afraid I think the most recent thing I put on my iPod was John Mayer. Which is
unfair question by me. Now everybody knows Taylor Swift's going to say, who on earth is John Mayer? Presumably,
well, they need to go and find out because he's good.
Presumably, he's a singing climatologist. Thank you very much indeed. Tell us just again, we can shamelessly promote other shows here on Unprecedented. Tell us about Full Throttle again.
Okay, well, Full Throttle looks at matters which are germane to motoring, but they may not be on the face of it directly connected. But we've had a lot of people on the program. We've just, as you mentioned, had Viscount Christopher Monkton. We've had Catherine Porter, who's an expert on energy matters, David Turver, likewise, Howard Cox of Fairfuel UK, and we will be having a pretty clued up climate scientist called Brian Catt to talk with me about the science and talk through it and try and make it understandable to the layman, because the problem with a lot of this is it's deliberately made impenetrable to the layman, so he just has to take the word of experts, and a lot of the experts have a ideological bias, shall I say.
Yeah. Let me do something which my producer says I have to do, and I want to do it, which is quotes from our viewers. Interesting show. Thanks, says Carla Mids. Thank you. Interesting guest. Theresa May's husband is the biggest cannabis grower in the UK. I don't think that's provable. I think I'll take that as a joke. I shall take that as either as an observation about medicinal cannabis or a joke, so that don't come after us, please, authorities. The Columnids adds, so they should know CO2 helps plants grow. That's the point that's being made about the cannabis. All right, so that is good. To be honest, Kemi is just trying to stay relevant these days, Columnids adds. And Piers Corbyn agrees with the guest, apparently.
Yeah.
A couple more.
Can I just chime in with a quote? You know, we keep getting this comment from our great and glorious I was going to call him leader, you know, sort of like Kim Jong-un, a prime minister, I meant. He keeps going on about far left and far right.
Yeah.
There's a political philosopher, she's dead now, Ayn Rand, Ayn-Rand, and she said, and to me, this is blatantly obvious, but people don't seem to understand. She said that fascism and communism are not two opposites, but two rival gangs fighting over the same territory. Both are variants of statism based on the collectivist principle that man is the rightless slave of the state. And when you realize that, you forget about far left and far right. They're just totalitarian, and left and right are the same thing. It's the same toxic political ideology, just with a different label on the bucket. And we need them like we need a hole in the head. They need to be moved out of the political space, and they need to be disempowered.
Well, okay, that's an electoral thing. Let me go through the rest of the comments. Colin says Leaning Tower of Big Ben from the picture earlier on. There's only 0.0004% carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, says Andrew P. It's actually 0.04. Yeah. It's 10 times more than you think, but thousands of times less than a lot of people think. Little Carol asks, if I leave the tap running, will the sea fill up? Colin says, let's find out. I say, yes, try it. Yeah. But your water bill might go up a bit. And Colin moans, I just had my latest water bill, robbing so-and-sos, can't use the language. Little Carol, if you don't pay, there's nothing they can do, as they cannot turn off your supply because of sanitary reasons. I didn't know that. Okay, well, that's a separate debate. Again, a couple more. Christopher Jennings says they charge at 92.5% return. Not sure. How many reside in the property? There's, I think that's probably to do with water bills again. And there's a huge separate debate going on there, which can't read all of now because we're nearly out of time. And I, for one, have had enough of experts, says Little Carol. Hopefully you don't mean Brian. But the people we're talking about aren't experts. That's the whole point, really. They don't know what they're talking about, really. If you were to summarize, and thank you, do keep those comments coming. I'm very grateful that you are in increasing numbers getting involved in the chat. If you were to summarize your position on climate change and the climate emergency, what would it be, Brian? Keep it to under 30 seconds.
Look, the natural variability of our climate swamps any human influence.
Great.
End of.
Nice.
End of.
There is no climate crisis, folks. Go and fly to Torremolinos as many times as you want, because what's coming out of the engines is the food of life. It's plant food.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Brian. That is Brian, who you will also find on Full Throttle, a great two-parter coming up. If you're watching this live, you'll find it all in the archive as well. Please do subscribe. Do subscribe. Go to Unprecedented TV on YouTube and do subscribe. It'll take you like 30 seconds, and it helps us so much if you do. And then you get announcements and everything else. And lots of great things will happen in the future there as well. Lots of other shows as well coming up as well. Do please keep an eye on what we're doing here. We're here to serve you, and our US division is getting ready and revving up. And then we're going to have a great new show there as well. More of that to follow. Thanks so much. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, you can always find us online. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.